First, I want to say, and foremost, our kids are our kids. They're not autistic. This is Kira. She's 14. She goes to school. She has a lot of interests. She reads. She watches TV. She likes video games. She likes the computer. She likes to do a lot of things that typical children do. It just happens to be that she also has autism. And this is something we have to learn to live with.
I'm Robert Darlow. I'm the father.
I'm Kira Darlow.
I'm Carol Darlow, and I'm the grandmother of Kira. Kira was born 6 weeks prematurely, so she was in the hospital for about 10 days until she was able to maintain her body temperature, and then she came home. So she was very small, like 4 pounds. But as an infant, she was pretty much like any other infant, we thought. She had some colic, but other than that, no real problems. She was a real quiet baby. She hardly ever cried. She didn't actually turn over until she was almost 6 months. So we were a little alarmed at that because most babies turn over before that age. And then when she learned to turn over, she rapidly progressed from turning over to crawling to
Running.
sitting and then walking and running. So she was walking at 9.5 months. At about age 2, she was beginning to talk. She was actually beginning to use sentences at that age. And I had to go off island for an emergency, so I was gone for about 2 months. When I left, Kira was laughing and beginning to talk more, and a really happy kid. She was really smiling a lot, laughing, playing with her toys. When I returned, she was no longer verbal, and she would just sit there and throw her toys on the floor, and she had no affect, no facial expression, no smiling, no laughing. So we were a little alarmed at that, but because I am a primary caregiver for Kira, we thought maybe it had to do with the fact that I had been gone for so long. But things didn't improve, and we put her in a daycare to see if maybe being around other children would help, but there was no improvement. As a matter of fact, she did not socialize at all with the other children, and she would crawl under the table and put her hands over her ears. She didn't want to be around any noise. She didn't want them talking. And when they went outside, she'd go off to the side. When the other children were playing, she'd be by herself. So, and then she didn't do normal things like other kids. You know, kids bring you things, show you things, point at things. She didn't do that. Initially, although I had suspected there was a problem with autism, it's always a shock, and it's very hard to accept. I think, you know, parents and family expect when they have a newborn child, they dream of all the things the child's going to do, go to college, have a family, work, and all these things. And with a child on the spectrum, that's not always possible. Many of the children are never independent at all, and some of them have severe cognitive disabilities, of which we're very fortunate that Kira does not. So it was a shock. It was difficult to deal with. And the problem was finding some supports on the island. That presented a big problem to us because we really didn't know how to proceed. And Rob, you can tell how you felt because it's largely different. You didn't even...
Oh, it's difficult. First child. It was hard enough just having a child. But finding out something was wrong, didn't know how to take it. Knew that it wasn't going to be normal, and had to rely on others to tell me where to go from there.
Not too long afterwards, we heard an advertisement for ACT. And that was really a blessing for us because I went to the first meeting then, and at that meeting they happened to have people there that were really helpful for us and being able to direct us towards getting some assistance and getting her the services that she needed. So for us, that was a real blessing, and that support group, I think, is really important for moving forward. Some of the highlights is, of course, it's always exciting when you see progress taking place. And in our case, there's been quite a bit of progress. So we're really happy about that.
Lucky.
Every time she's able to do something or things that we took for granted with our other children, you know, speaking in sentences, asking questions. You know, most kids just automatically ask questions, but it wasn't until really a couple of years ago that Kira began to ask questions. The normal things that most parents take for granted were really highlights for us when she began to do that. Holidays, early on she had no concept of them, no interest, no nothing. So it was exciting when she was about 7 years old or 8 years old that she finally began to notice that, oh, there's a difference between, you know, this day and the holiday, and began to take a little bit of interest in things. Well, I think, you know, when somebody first tells you that your child has a disability, if they're able to direct you towards resources at that time, is very beneficial, because most of us have felt really all alone and not knowing where to go for assistance or anyone who's experienced the same things you're experiencing. It's really difficult when you see you have a child that's not the same as other children, because they clearly stand out, and it's very hard. It's very hurtful to see them not being able to participate in life the way that other children do.
Knowing more about it off the bat would help, because you sit there for a while trying to figure out what you're going to do all by yourself, and you have no knowledge of what actually is she has.
I think, though, his experience is pretty typical, because the parents were in denial for a great deal of time, and this is really common. And no matter how much knowledge you give a parent during that period of time, they're not able to take it in. They're not able to take it in until they're able to come to grips with the problem and accept that there is a problem. So, and that's, I think, very typical of all of our families. Well, I think you need to be around other people who are experiencing the same things that you are. It's one thing to have knowledge of something, to be able to talk to somebody about it. As a nurse, in the school, I dealt with some parents who had children on the spectrum. It's a whole different thing when you've got a family member who's going through it. So I think being able to sit down and actually have somebody to talk to that understands where you're coming from. So I think the support groups are really, really important. I think it's important to share your information with teachers, because you can't expect teachers just to know. She's got a wonderful team of teachers that works with her, and we're finding out that the more interaction there is between family and teachers, the better it is for the student. Every child with autism is different. Every single one is wired different. So you'll see different behaviors in each of our children, although they're all on the spectrum and all are diagnosed with autism, because they have in common three things. Inability to communicate normally. They have repetitive movements of some type usually, and socially they are not able to interact appropriately. So these are three main things that are common among all. But some of the other things, the other behaviors such as sensitivity to sound and things, and individual things, they vary from person to person. So I think the parent needs to share with the teacher what they have found that works with their child. You know, having that knowledge is helpful for them.
People to let you know exactly where you're headed down the path as far as what to do, what not to do. It's a big learning curve if you haven't been there before. It's like some things that you normally do with a child, you can't do with a child with autism. For instance, time out. Autistic kids love time out. They love being alone. You put them in a corner, they're happy. Didn't work at all.
And some of the things that you think are really fun for kids, like going to the circus, going to the movies and stuff, wow, that was a disaster. in her case, she's very sensitive to sound and being close to people. And for the first, only in the last like 5 years has she been able to go to movies, because we use the headphones that, they use for heavy equipment and things to deaden the sound. So she's able to enjoy movies now, but we tried taking her to Disneyland when she was like 4 years old.
Oh boy.
It was really bad. She couldn't enjoy it because, it's a lot of noise, a lot of people, and we didn't realize that. And every time we went to the mall or were near a movie theater, if she saw the sign, she would just start screaming uncontrollably, and then we'd have to leave. But over the years, she's now able to do those things. She uses the headphones when we go to places like that. And yeah, it's taken us a while to get to this point where we can be that accepting. But I think the most important thing, if I were to tell a parent, is that fear keeps us oftentimes from seeking more information and more help. But in the case of children who are on the spectrum, it's really, really important. If you see that your child is not developing as you see other children developing, you need to go find out why. You need to find out why. It may not be autism, maybe something else. Maybe they have a hearing problem. It could be a lot of different things. But instead of withdrawing and not doing anything, you need to do something. You need to seek out some help and go find out, for the child's sake, what is the problem. And you may be pleasantly surprised that there is not a real problem that can't be dealt with very easily. And if there is a real problem, then you need to get some direction as to where to go. My hope is that as children who have developmental disorders and autism and such, as the department becomes aware of that, Department of Education, that they direct parents to support groups, to places where they can get that kind of support and help. Because, that's what we do. We share among each other. We share where we've gone, who we've talked to, what's worked for our children, what hasn't worked. Some of the things we've all experienced, and other things we're sort of alone in, and we sort of have to work it out. But I think most of all, don't hide your head in the sand. Go out there and seek and get some help.
And the faster you do it, the better, because that time is precious and very important. We missed 2 years, and it could have really given her a head start in catching up. And the longer you wait, the harder it is.